knows too much.
Had Howard Hughes not been so phobic, he might have taken over the world. Hughes became a real threat to the Eastern establishment after his companies began dominating the CIA and Defense Department contracts. Hughes was stunned when the Eastern establishment moved to yank TWA Airlines away from him right after he transformed it into the greatest jet fleet in America. Maybe it was part of the oil company's desire for a monopoly on all phases of their industry, although the excuse given was that Hughes was unfit to command such a sensitive national security position and had squandered immense resources on his spruce goose boondoggle. There was also talk of England having superseded the USA in jet technology, intimating that Hughes had lost his technological edge. But the problems really started when Hughes announced TWA was going global and would commence transatlantic flights competing against Pan Am. The real power center of gravity in the United States appears to reside with those oil companies, the Seven Sisters, the monopoly that transformed into an energy cartel. Because his grandfather invented a drill bit essential to oil drilling, Hughes maintained one of the few hiccups in their dream of controlling all phases of the industry. Hughes fought tooth and nail to keep TWA, even to the point of calling out the Rockefeller Trust as the true instigators of the plot against him in open session of Congress. But Hughes eventually lost this war against the Eastern establishment. He responded by taking the $500 million in buyout in cash and moving to Las Vegas, where he intended to buy the state, a masterful plan well on its way to success. Just as Onassis survived his assault by investing in Monte Carlo, Hughes wisely saw Vegas casinos as the most secure way to ensure profits. Hughes already maintained one of the largest private security forces in the world and picked Robert Maheu as his underboss. Maheu had been recruited into Intel Ops while a law student at Georgetown University, the oldest Jesuit educational institution in America. You'd be surprised how many spooks are recruited right out of law school. During World War II, Maheu posed as a German sympathizer and successfully infiltrated New York's Nazi party, the German-American Bund. As the war drew to a close, the Vatican and CIA began conspiring on the transfer of important Nazi assets into new roles working for American intel, while also transferring the stolen Nazi and Japanese loot into the Vatican Bank, where it could be washed beyond all recognition of its origin. According to a member of his staff, Maheu was summoned to Vice President Nixon's office in 1954 at the behest of the National Security Council and given a green light to destroy the relationship between the King of Saudi Arabia and Onassis, who had captured a monopoly on shipping Saudi oil. In 1960, Maheu approached his old Chicago acquaintance, Johnny Roselli, claiming a business interest was willing to fund a $150,000 contract on Castro. Roselli refused the money but introduced Maheu to Sam Gold and Joe, who would later turn out to be Sam Giancana and Santos Trafficante. Roselli soon joined the CIA's team at JM Wave, the largest CIA station outside Langley at the time, a secret base shut down by JFK, which seems to have been a strategic disaster. You can fire spooks easily, but disarming them is another matter. The good ones can easily shift into the private sector or even join the competition. Hughes used Maheu as his go-to private spook, but after the bitter Rockefeller feud elevated him to run the Hughes gambling empire in Vegas. One day, however, Hughes disappeared in the middle of the night. In an elaborately scripted getaway, dual caravans departed simultaneously to two airports, one of which held a drugged Hughes, the other a decoy. Both planes were flown out of the country, one eventually landing in the Bahamas, where the occupant took up residency in a hotel owned by Hughes's business rival, Resorts International, a firm connected with both the CIA and the Sicilian Men of Honor. No one ever saw Hughes again. Hughes did appear by phone once in what many believe was a staged impersonation by a skilled actor. Likely he was maintained somewhere as a near vegetable until he finally wasted away. There was never any attempt for any independent agency to investigate Hughes's sudden midnight move, forsaking a hotel he owned to eventually live inside a hotel owned by his principal rival in the casino business. Mayhew went to court convinced Hughes had been abducted by a conspiracy involving his Mormon staff, who had seized day-to-day operations away from Mayhew and were rapidly replacing the entire top layer of his corporations with Mormon controllers. Over the phone, the Hughes double accused Mayhew of stealing him blind as the excuse for the midnight move, but Mayhew won a libel case after Hughes's handlers failed to produce any evidence of theft. Despite never having met Hughes in person, Mayhew had been drawing a salary of $500,000 a year, the equivalent of several million today. And although Mayhew won a large settlement, the judgment was overturned on appeal.
Before my time is through, I'm going